Okay, let's go ahead and get started. And if others join, then they're welcome. So hello, everybody, and thank you for joining us in this first of a series of clinical conversations. We really appreciate you all being here, especially for this kickoff. I'm Rebecca Knowles. I'm an occupational therapist and a registered yoga teacher, and I'm the training and research manager at Unite ILS. So I'll be facilitating the conversation today. And then I'll invite our clinical advisory team to introduce themselves. And let's start with Doreen.
There we go. I tried to mute to decrease the beeping for everybody. Anyhow, yeah, this is an exciting new idea that we're trying and we're presenting and just having these conversations. I'm excited about it. Anyhow, I'm Doreen Hunt. I'm an occupational therapist, primarily in pediatrics my entire career. Although since I've ventured down the path of using sound interventions and working with the integrated listening systems, now Unite ILS products, I also have worked with adults, especially in a rehab type of situation after strokes and head trauma. But my background is definitely mostly with children and families. And my topic, shall I move into that area?
Let's hold that. We'll just do a quick introduction. Yeah, Anna, would you mind going next?
Yes. So I'm Ana do Vale. I'm originally from Brazil, so you can sense the accent in there. I'm in Boulder, Colorado. And, you know, my passion is working with kids, with families. I have a lot of adults that I work with. And my essence is to bring that spiritual healing into the process of utilizing the Safe and Sound protocol into a journey that I call is the journey of self, or encountering the self. And I love working in natural environments. So farm, I work with blue herons and turtles and owls and horses. So yeah, so that's a little bit about me.
Super, thank you, Anna. And Heather?
Hi, this is such a wonderful opportunity, and I'm so grateful to be here and at this level, at this point in the SSP journey. I'm born and raised in Maine in the United States, and I have a therapy practice, Life Works of Maine, focused on adults primarily, complex people with complex trauma, extensive trauma, and also complex medical conditions who are having trouble finding receptive ears and getting healing. And I'm so delighted to be joining a group of people that are endorsing spirituality and body and developmental growth and learning opportunity. And the SSP is the common thread for me.
Super, thank you, Heather. And last but not least, Liz.
Hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be part of this SSP provider community, such as a special experience. I'm Liz Charles. I'm in Southwest England, and I'm a medical doctor, but an absolute polyvagal geek. I'm dedicated to SSP and all the transformation that can provide. I specialize in remote delivery now, and my main client base is adults suffering with the effects of complex trauma. And I also enjoy supporting fellow SSP providers. So this is a really lovely opportunity to share our practice, and I think being part of a community and share, because we're all still exploring all that SSP and polyvagal informed practice can have. So I'm just really excited to be part of this conversation and see where it goes. Quite a special experience. So thank you for all being here.
That's beautiful. Thank you, Liz. I think to start things off, I'll just share for the group that our topic for this webinar is bottom-up interventions. So we'll be discussing challenges and solutions, or wisdoms of bottom-up therapy, both ideologically and in practice. So that includes some trends and insights and some unique applications of the SSP. You can use the chat box to submit questions during the event. We may not have a lot of time, but we'll try to allow some at the end for responding to those. And there are a few that have been pre-submitted that we'll make an attempt to address as well. So hang with us there. And then I think to kick things off, I'd love to just offer to the group, if you could share what bottom-up therapy is or what it means to you.
Are we going in order of things, Rebecca?
We'll popcorn for this one, so anyone's invited.
For me, bottom-up therapy means that you are bringing your theoretical framework to encounter what is happening with the client, in particular here when the SSP is being used and is stimulating something to happen in the body, that you are following what is happening and you are using what unfurls as a way to lead you forward into supporting the systems that are lighting up. And that supports neuroplasticity and growth and change.
And I'll just share.
This is,
Oh.
oh, sorry. This is Michelle, and very simply to me, I'm not as experienced as maybe some of you are with the SSP, but I've been exposed to it. I've had some time with Liz. To me, it is getting out of the head for so many of us as therapists and individuals who are interested in healing, but so much of which has resided in the cognitive functions rather than the embodied experience.
Thank you for sharing that. I think for the remainder of this webinar, I'll invite everyone to mute and we'll focus on just the conversation with our clinical advisory team. But thank you for that contribution. Doreen, did you have something to share?
Yeah, if we're all answering, I would just say immediately my bottom-up thought is, we're looking at brainstem processing, we're looking at limbic system, we're looking at the roots of the tree. If we look at our human body as a tree, and not thinking about just cortical executive functioning, and so especially that's it's all about neuroplasticity and how it influences the brain function, our autonomic state, and our just processing of sensory input, how much that influences behavior, and just behavior in adults and children, and response. Right? How we respond to things that are coming at us or to us in our lives.
That's so well said. It's always input and output, isn't it? Yeah. Liz or Anna, anything to add?
I would say maybe, if that's okay, Liz.
Of course, go for it.
Go for it. So bottom up to me has a lot to do with focusing into what Steiner calls the soul faculties of our human existence, which has to do with feeling, thinking, and willing. So you take in the experience through feelings and you warm it up through your heart, through the sensorial experience. Therefore, that influences your thinking. And as your thinking is influenced, also your willpower or your capacity to move towards life is also warmed up in that process. So it's feeling, thinking, willing.
That's really nice, Anna. Very holistic picture.
So I come from a very top-down position as a doctor and my upbringing, and so bottom up is a whole new world to me, and it's a wonderful, wonderful world, and I'm just hungry for more. And so I had this idea that it was brain controlling my body, but I now realize that we're bodies with brains attached, and we don't stop here and make our bodies do what we want. Well, we can, but then the body says no, or the body keeps the score. And that was my experience. And so it's about welcoming the sensations, our whole sensory world, including interoception, up into our awareness, and all the things that we can do to support that, and being the polyvagal theory fanatic that I am, always conscious of the fact that the vagus nerve, this huge nerve that connects brain and body, is actually 80% or 4/5 of up from the body up to the brain, whereas we often think that it's the brainstem going down, but it's coming up. And that's what I'm constantly aware of myself, and constantly working with my clients to talk about that we're, how can we explore those things that we may have turned off due to for the many reasons in our lives, and how can we bring them back up again? And that's where bottom-up therapies, for me, they're so rich, and there's so many new ways coming all the time through all the conferences and the way that we're working with people, and we're just learning. And to be able to bring those up so that the top-down therapies can then work and integrate together, and we can repattern all our processes and our networks, and it's just integration and up and down. But really that bottom up is such an important and new way of thinking that I just think is just the way to go, this holistic way. It is my passion to explore it more and more.
Liz, I love that, what you just said, the inviting the information from the body and the senses, the understanding that a cognitive wish to diminish that or discount that and change behavior is bound to fail. And it's been a red herring for a long time. So thank you so much for that. I'm just a little bit of everybody knows I'm a geek. And so the geek part that I want to add with regard to talk about bottom up and top down is that if you're a professional, you are functioning by default from a top down position because you're educated in a body of knowledge. Now, the challenge is to see where that belongs and to see how that intersects with what's happening in front of you, and perhaps even to really shift how you're making sense out of what happens, because the sense making that we've had has not added up, and it's not accurate. So thanks, Liz.
And I think I always come back to state creates story, and I think it brings those two together very well, because the state, our autonomic nervous state, which is controlled by our neuroception, which is subconscious brainstem, if we can affect state, which is what polyvagal theory is all about and what SSP is all about, through regulation and awareness, being aware of our neuroception, then the state creates story. That our circumstances stay the same, but depending on the state that we're in, whether we're ventral vagal, sympathetic, or dorsal vagal, it will create, the story will change. If we can come with all the skills of our practitioners and our therapists to support becoming into a ventral vagal state with the help of SSP and all the other therapies, we're then more able to use our story and our cognition. And that's the work for me. So the state supports our cognition, and the two work together. It's all about integration. It's not binary. It's all about this flow and being aware of that. So we can be aware of our state. We then know where story comes from, whereas we often think that our story is our story and we don't realize that it's come from state. So for me, it's that shift, and that's the power of SSP and polyvagal informed therapies. For me, that's where I come from. And then try and integrate all the different body therapies as I can to help us with that awareness.
That's beautiful, Liz. I love the connection to state and story. I think that language will resonate with a lot of our providers. And I'm also hearing that it's not bottom up or top down. It's considering how bottom up influences, supports, integrates top down approaches.
I have to say, I think I'm pretty sure that's Deb Dana's language. It's not mine. Most of my language comes from Deb Dana, so I'll already reference her now for anything else I say.
Super. I think we're probably all influenced by her in one way or another. That's great. Doreen, would you mind launching into your topic, introducing the challenge and wisdom you've prepared?
Sure, and I think it's perfect because of talking about state creating story. I want to first preface my my talk with my location. So I'm outside the Seattle area, which is a very techie area, and in a pediatric therapy practice. Definitely more middle and upper class families that we service at our clinic. So that's an important piece just for moving into my topic is that desire and need to help the whole family in order for us to help the child many times. Not all the time, but when that occurs, that has been like I now have a tool within the SSP that we've moved from working with just the child in the clinic with sound therapy interventions on top of our other interventions to also trying to support the family's autonomic state, co-regulation ability, because it influences the child's health and the progress we can make in the situation. And so it's been wonderful to have this tool. And I wanted to bring that up about, I'm sure there's a wealth of many people with different backgrounds that are on today's call, but for, the information I'll share is definitely from this family, looking at this whole family perspective. And that's where my story was going to go. And I know when we do the SSP, like with an entire family, I many times have heard the parents describe it as there's harmony in our home now. And which is huge, right? That's what we all want. We want that calmer, respectful conversations and listening, having space for each other. And I will say that during COVID, we've all experienced just so much more, dysregulation in our lives. And so it's been a really extra special tool to have this during this really tough pandemic year plus, right? Which is still moving forward. So I thought we would talk a little bit about that, where, again, that disclosure of this population I'm servicing, yes, the entire population, anybody could have some trauma in their lives that is significant. So I just want to make sure we're talking about that, have that in the back of your mind when we think about this. But there's so often where we're working with a child where we see a lot of growth and change, and especially these huge jumps after we've administered the Safe and Sound protocol. And when we talk with the parents, they don't have the same change with the child at home. They often will feel these same stuck behaviors. And those are some of those red flags that we want to help work beyond just the child. And I see it also with parents where just their first conversation, their state reflects their story, as you guys were just saying. And those are the parents that right away I start to really work on thinking about this model of working with using the SSP with more than just the child. Another symptom that I often see would be someone with low affect or a very monotone voice. When we're, doing interview with the parent, we're getting to, learn about the child. And so those are red flags for me that I want to branch into the whole family, or at least the parent I'm working with. And also you can, sometimes get that sense of just some attachment issues with the child that that we're here to see. And so those are the red flags that definitely put us into thinking, how can we support more than just the child? And the SSP has been a terrific tool for that. And, we think about how the SSP is an opener, and the SSP with that input to that vagus nerve, improving that vagal tone, the vagal complex of these foundational cranial nerves and how they function. For the SSP to be, I've moved from a practice of the SSP being used all 5 hours administered in our therapy practice to more with this model, more in the home where the child feels safe, especially during COVID times. As well as, it really helps the parent to get that sense they've noticed their dysregulated state, and helping the parent to recognize the benefit of doing this together with your child for that co-regulation for the child as well as the parent. And I'd say, one of the toughest things as practitioners, how do we start this conversation with the parent? Oftentimes it's a feeling of, we're here because we want you to help our child, fix our child's difficulties, and bringing it into a bigger picture sometimes can be challenging. And I'd say the most important thing that has worked very well is immediately, we educate about polyvagal theory and about our autonomic nervous systems, and this the pattern of how we can move in between these different states of ventral vagal, sympathetic, and dorsal vagal, understanding what those look like, what they feel like. Just for people's information is how do you do that best? I've put together an email template that explains the Safe and Sound protocol, that explains polyvagal theory, and it includes nice links to the ILS Unite website, as well as YouTube videos about autonomic state, and about, from videos of Dr. Porges speaking and learning about polyvagal theory. So that way they can learn about it in their own amount of time it takes them to research, to understand. So often during a session where that child is here present, the parent is half or more focused on the child. And there's a lot of distractions. So by having information that they can read and learn from in their own time in a quiet evening or things like that, because we all know we're processing, 2/3, 1/3 of what we're hearing auditorily, especially in a distracting environment. So that's been really, that's foundational in helping start that journey where we're teaching the whole family about autonomic regulation. And making through that, we can really pull in. I love, one of my favorite things is how, actions are automatic and adaptive, and they come from our autonomic state. And so it's not, it's those patterns of protection that are causing those behaviors, not that your child, so often I'll hear a parent say, but he's really a good kid. And we know that every person is a good person, but our autonomic state is what's causing these sensory sensitivities, these behavioral responses, things like that. So that foundational learning, years ago, just the foundational learning about sensory integration used to change the parent's perspective of looking at their child and their child's behavior. And now we're a whole step further with autonomic state and autonomic regulation, and just the understanding of that, how that perception changes immediately just from the understanding. There's been no treatment done to the child or the parent yet. It's that educational piece, right? So I've just really seen so much benefit from helping to work with the whole family and not just the child through using the SSP. I'm not a therapist that's doing background with that parent on their life story, on their traumas, their difficulties. I can feel those difficulties when I'm working with them. What I would move into is, how I've managed to work with using the SSP safely without monitoring a parent. I feel like it has worked very well with no negative episodes or things happening. I've had a few parents where they stopped listening because it was too much for their nervous system. I've had some parents where I made sure that they weren't listening through me, but I recommended that they were using SSP through a sort of, a mental health counselor, a psychotherapist who uses the SSP. So I link them up together. So that happens occasionally. And that's usually because I get to know the parents, and I feel I get a sense without having to do a complete questionnaire with that parent. I have used the ILS, help me, Rebecca, what we're calling it. I can't think right now, but the
ANS screener?
Not the other one.
The intake form.
Right, this intake?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. That's what I wanted to call it. But then I thought, well, is there a fancier name? I'm forgetting.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
So I have used that with them because I get a little bit of information that way. But what I've said or wanted to share that has worked so well is the most important thing about educating the parents first. About polyvagal theory, about the SSP and how it can benefit all of us. I call it autonomic self-care, and how we all benefit from it. And I also always share that I've done it a gazillion times. I use it ongoing, but also staff at my clinic that I own here, they use it as well when needed, when there's a lot of stress going on. And educating them about the administration, the appropriate way that we can use the SSP, or that we need to use the SSP, is always paying attention to the body, and teaching them what that would look like or feel like when they need to stop the music. It's not about the certain minutes of number of minutes that they should listen each day. It's we've moved from, thank goodness, from our original what was done in research, and that was an hour a day for 5 consecutive days, and that needed to be consistent. That was what was chosen and measured, and we've seen great improvements and changes with a much slower administration of the SSP. And so sometimes I give a ballpark of 30 minutes a day. 30 minutes a day, and we'll do it over 10 days, but it's always with education of stop when the child needs to stop. If the child is taking their headphones off, the child is showing signs of dysregulation, just moving their body differently, and same thing for the adult, and making sure that they're really listening to the body and what's happening while listening. And so, and with that, they have been empowered, and we've had terrific results with seeing shifts in relationships and shifts in co-regulation in the families, which produces the shifts. It extends the shifts we see from therapy with the child to last so much longer, and to continue to use our other tools to continue to make change. So that was the topic I thought I'd share about.
That's great. Thank you, Doreen. I think I really appreciate what you shared early about harmony in the house. And when I hear harmony, what I think about is safety, and how that shows up in behavior, and how influential context and environment can be in autonomic state and behavior. Mm-hmm. Any thoughts from Heather, Anna, or Liz?
No, I just want to, say thank you, Doreen. And I have a pretty similar experience in working with families. And that's what we are doing. We take the whole family to the farm, or we block the clinic, several rooms, and we have the whole family be there with us for an hour and a half when, we are working different elements, SSP, and also other activities that will help them digest and integrate all the listening. Mm-hmm. So yes.
Anna, I love the parts about your comments about taking your folks to the farm, and also recognizing that we have a repertoire of behavior that is defensive and that people have to learn about for themselves. And there's nothing like a 1,500-pound horse to teach you the lesson that if you want something good to happen, that horse has to be in the right state of mind, because otherwise no kind of argument or persuasion is going to make the difference. And it's just so fundamental to the autonomic state.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you.
And my work is very different to Doreen, because I work with adults with a history of complex trauma usually. And so we're titrating very, very slowly, often only a few minutes a session once a week. So at the very other end of the scale. But what I love about the work is that people aren't in isolation usually, although in COVID, obviously, they have been much more. But the way that their family members change, and they say, I don't know what's happening. And I mean, sometimes I don't comment because it's about that, I'm working personally with them. But then when the conversation comes up, I don't understand why my son behaved like that. I've never done it before. So it's like, should we just have a little look at that? Because once the adult in the family changes their state and they can regulate themselves more, and it's nervous system against nervous system. And the work that went is like, that's understanding. It takes away the shame as well when they do understand as well, which is why you have to be very careful how we introduce the ideas that we can be responsible for other people's reactions, and how that can feel shaming, because that's what I love about polyvagal theory as well, that it takes away the shame for our reactions, that we're surviving, and we got to where we did by surviving, and there's no way we denigrate anything at all about that, but we can change and we can integrate that, and then seeing how people that we're interacting with can then be interacting with our different nervous system. It's a beautiful work too. And then I have adults who've done some beautiful work when they start learning about breathing techniques and different self-regulation techniques, and their children pick up on it, and then they end up, and I often use Peter Levine's Vooing. It's just like they voo together, and it's like, oh mum, I think you need to do some breathing exercises. It's just like, whoa. And so the whole family starts like, well, who can voo the longest, and those kinds of things. And it becomes such a beautiful, someone's come to me because of their trauma background, and then suddenly the whole family opens up, and you can just feel the ripples. And it's just the greatest privilege to see that happening through this very, very slow work, because of someone coming with a huge trauma background and working with that, and then seeing the changes within themselves, and then realizing the impact that that has, and to know about those ripples that go beyond and beyond. I mean, for me, that's why I'm just addicted to this work. I just can't get enough of it. It's just such a privilege to work with people at that level, and to see I mean, who knows where the ripples will go. It's just beautiful, beautiful work.
It's amazing. Thank you, Liz. I love that you bring in this idea of shame. I think it ties in nicely with what Doreen said about it's not a good kid or a bad kid, or a good person or a bad person, but tuning into state and story, and that understanding that autonomic state and history helps us take shame out of the picture, doesn't it? Yeah.
Rebecca? Could I take 1 or 2 minutes? Just there's a few very important questions in the chat that kind of goes along with.
Sure.
Maybe real quick. Yeah, we're trying to short and sweet things. Someone asked about the symptoms that you would describe to help the family recognize when they need, to take a break, especially in the adult, maybe more. I always talk to them about any signs of their body overheating. So their temperature change which could be more sympathetic response happening. I mean, obviously, if you're in 100 degrees, that's different. But a change in body temperature, a change in heart rate that feels like your heart is speeding up, any type of, if they were noticing pupil dilation, that would be another sign of more sympathetic response happening to their bodies. And their breathing changing, any kind of nauseous feeling, those would be responses that are showing that there's too much input to your vagus nerve for you right now. There's sort of a sympathetic response happening. And so in a child, like I described, it was more like you see their behaviors change, you see sort of dysregulated, they want to get up and run, or they'll usually take the headphones off. I've had enough. That would be more of what we typically see. And then I also want to just quickly address the last question here was, how do you navigate good enough parent self-image sensitivity when you branch from the child to the family? And I think that's a really good question, because as I kind of gleaned, how to bring up this conversation with the parent can be a very touchy subject. And it's a very important one that we do it with grace, as well as just support, right? And so the more people feel educated versus being just told, you need this, is really important. And so the more they are educated on recognizing their own state and how their state influences others, that ripple effect that Liz just spoke to, the more they have knowledge, the less they're defensive. And so again, I always bring up that our staff uses this for self-care. I use it for self-care, those kinds of things. So it's not shameful that and I always also say, it's like, so then the child doesn't feel like they're the only one that's broken. We all can improve ourselves. We all can improve how we communicate or how we respond. And that's what this does. It helps us to be in the state to listen and not be reactive. And so usually you just you can get in the back door, but hopefully that helps.
Yeah, thank you, Doreen. It sounds like an invitation rather than a finger shaking or saying what you should do. Yeah. Anna, would you like to introduce your topic?
Sure. So here we go. So in my work, what I see as being a personal challenge, and has been since the beginning, and to now, because I continue to have this dance with the SSP. The dance continues, where I continue to observe the shifts and the nuances of the process. And, it was at the very beginning of SSP, about 5 years ago, when I started using it, that I started noticing that there was a relationship with implicit memory and explicit capacity in the being that was also being nurtured during the listening, as if the subconscious forces were being warmed up in one way or another, and creating this well of force that would come more consciously. And I don't mean cognizing, but consciously through art, to expression, to language. And I continue to track that, because I feel that if you are aware, there is a possibility that you actually can bring the awareness of these intrinsic shifts, not to cognize, but to create a form of meaning, this fabric that allows the individual, if it's a child or an adult, to have a more foundation for their own self, or a closer relationship to their own self. So in the case study that I chose, many of you might know of, was a child that actually had a lot of implicit memories from his birth, that when the time he was born, the child next door in the next room died, and the staff came to let the family know that they needed to be more quiet because a child had just died, and the mom was having a cesarean, and father was very confused. So he was angry, he was confused, he was guilty. And in the family system, dissociation and all of other emotions were bundled together in the arrival of a child at age 9, was working with a trauma that actually had that was inflicted during his birth. So my training is in somatic experiencing. So I'm a supervisor and consultant for SC. So I'm always bringing Peter Levine's work into it, and in trying to understand what is really happening with that embodiment that results in more presence, in that desire to socially engage. And that presence also brings that capacity for you to relate to your own self, but also to see the other and relate with the other with less projections. So this work is beautiful in couples therapy. And I have done a few of the couples intervention where they themselves speak of this dance of self. And so the whole process, I'm looking, how can we come out of stories, which we say the child of history, to the child of self, right? So you have the potential, you have the possibility of actually cross what I call the eye of the needle, right around day 3 or so. It builds up with day 2, you cross on day 3, and then you arrive on day 5. So some of you might know that I have developed the SIGUN around the SSP implementation, where you're tracking sensations, emotions, the gesture that's very much held in your body, like the gesture of the moment. For us is a lot of fixity. Because of the pandemic, we lost a lot of our rhythms, and we are tending to become a little bit more rigid in our body, not only the neck pain, but our thoughts even, and our actions. So that's a little bit of what the challenge actually continues to be for me. So the other piece that I bring into this is my training is also in anthroposophy. And one will say, what is that, right? Anthroposophy is the psychology of body, soul, spirit. So when I mentioned at the beginning that I look at the soul faculties of feeling, thinking, and willing, and then coming together in this dance so that you warm up the experience of the listening, perhaps with working with copper rods or with a watercolor, when the sensorial experience is enhanced, there is this capacity of you bringing that wave to kind of tap on the door of a fixed thinking. And when that thaws out a little bit or becomes a little bit more fluid, that will also range into your actions, into your willpower. So, and then it routes back into your feeling, and you just become a more present human being. So that's the journey that I continue. And not to say that I'm not looking at auditory processing. Yes, I look at, you know, the sensory processing, yes, but through the 12 senses. So it's working a lot with senses that are not so traditional to our culture, like the sense of warmth. What does it do when I play with a copper ball and the ball is really warm after, you know, a minute, and I pick up the other ball and it's so cold? What is that warmth doing in the context of the listening or relating to each other? So using the sense of, you know, breath, using the sense of sight as we do, and the capacity to look far, look close. So that's why I also went into fields, not only the office. So I'm in the field and I can see the owl flying. The owl, and or the blue heron, like I mentioned. You know, I've seen a blue heron baby grow, and I would whistle to him. And when he grew big enough, he flew just by my head when he was leaving the land. And he comes back from time to time. So what I want to say with that is I have been influenced by the process of the SSP. I have been influenced by being the one that's delivering that listening protocol, because I'm becoming more present and more conscious in a way of bringing my feelings to influence my thinking. And it's continuing to evolve. So then, you know, I brought in a training. You know, I have the 12.5-hour training that I do to bring the faculties of the Sigan in the context of the listening. And then I'm bringing my professors from anthroposophy. I continue to look into somatic experiencing and sensory integration. And I continue to develop my own capacity to be a present observer in that process of looking, yes, the skin color changed and a tear rolled down the cheeks. And that's actually a process of discharge and completion. So I don't have to run and get a little Kleenex, a little you know, wiper for the tear. I can use my presence to warm up the present moment in which discharge and completion is occurring as the nervous system is shifting and perhaps letting go. So yes. I said too much. So anyways.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much. I'm always inspired by hearing how you integrate all these rich modalities with somatic experiencing and Sigan and sensory processing. It's so rich, and I'm sure this audience has benefited from hearing that. Any comments or questions from the clinical team before we move on to Heather? Yeah, Liz.
I too love hearing what Anna says, because I just always learn and continue to integrate so much of this sensory work and the world of the nature and our curiosity. So I'm constantly using those words, and the more we can be in ventral vagal state and use our social engagement system, the more we're able to feel our senses, to so explore, constantly exploring. So it's like, oh, what was that like? And having the curiosity to, I do it myself. So I share what my increased curiosity was. Like today, I was just sitting amongst grasses and watching little moths going around. It's like, what's that? I hadn't even noticed. So I walk my talk and then share those moments so that it becomes a shared experience that we're increasing, especially in COVID. We've had to look to nature, and what a blessing that has been when we've needed blessings to have nature, even if it's just bringing a leaf in from a pavement or something. But it's that sense of wonder, but also using all our senses. What does that leaf feel like? What does it smell like? What does it sound like if it crackles? And you know, all our different senses. That it's such a rich place, and we take them with them wherever we go. And so I always try to, everything I incorporate in my SSP is trying to do whatever you are, wherever you are, you can use, so that it's never, oh gosh, I haven't got such and such with me. So so it's our bodies, and that's where the bottom-up therapies are coming from. It's that whole sensory business of that's how we learn to live in life, and to open those up again and carry on being curious about them and working alongside rather than it being distant, and yeah, sort of swimming along. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to say. So very much, I haven't got it as structured as you are by any stretch of the imagination. It's very much individual to each client and what their interests are, but to try and widen their interests, or interest sounds a bit technical and cognitive. It's help them to explore their different sensations and to increase those and be curious about them, and listen out for the whispers rather than waiting for shouts to happen, so that we can start delving down and making things more granular.
That's great. Thank you, Liz. I appreciate the call out to nature and the body as being available to us. I think as therapists are always looking for tools, and it's a good reminder that those tools are there. They're available for our use. So, Heather, would you like to share your topic?
Well, let me take a shot at it. And I'm as you're talking, Liz and Anna, I'm savoring the presence of so many concepts that are critically important and show up through different therapeutic modalities, treatment approaches, very ancient methods. These are all things that have been here for a really long time, but we haven't known how to assemble them. So for me, working with adults in talk therapy, basically, which is taking a bit of a ragging, I would say, in the SSP community. But be that as it may, that's what I was trained to do, which is to work in talk therapy with adults. And what I was finding was that people were getting stuck, and it was a certain group of people who were getting stuck in their therapy. And I'll just back up and say, when I did my own work, it was with a Jungian. And so I read all of Jung's works and had a great introduction in depth psychology and the old guys, Freud and those folks. And so still in my work with adults, I began to use Judith Herman's work. And for some reason, as I started working, the group of adults that I was landing in were horribly abused people. And the work that I was needing to rely on to help me there was Colin Ross's work on satanic cults, on mind control, and using his trauma model. And he was the first person I was aware of who was actually talking about what happens real that's physiological and what is happening in the distorted sensorium of people who have been so messed with. And so I found that with these people, I could have really great alliances, and that I held clients, and that I didn't have no-shows, and they came and we worked hard, and things happened, and they backslid, and we gained ground, and they backslid. But fundamentally, something that was happening here was that they were having walls that they would talk about in various ways. Walls that were unwilled and unwanted and created barriers between them and me, them and the other people in their world, and were just a pervasive source of lack of receptivity for therapy. And so then you get bogged down in all of these very difficult kinds of therapy. Then recently what happened was I had a client who was one of these original clients who said, it's been 10 years we've been working together. I love you so much as my therapist, and let's celebrate. And I felt very ambivalent about it because yes, I felt the same way. And we had done horrible good work together, and I had gotten gray hair out of it. And still, it didn't feel good enough to me because she was still suffering. She was still being victimized. She was still being treated badly by neurologists and other people who saw her distortions in sensorium as just pure hallucinations, craziness, and so on. Well, enter the SSP 2 years ago. And 3 weeks ago, she said to me, I'm wondering what it's going to be like when I'm not in therapy with you anymore. That to me is the bottom line, that she feels like she could move forward in her life, having her own grounding, having gotten to herself, right? The first thing we do when our senses assault us, whether it's through somebody else's doing or through our own physical problems, the first thing we do is defensive exclusion. That's a very, very old psychoanalytic term, which means we cut ourselves off from our experience. And now we cannot get back to it unless we have help. And the fact that we can't get back to it is that source of shame that winds in on itself. It's like a toenail that just comes back through the paw pad in a kitty cat, right? So we need to be able to get in between this get into this shame cycle and disrupt it so that we can use ourselves to help co-regulate them back to themselves, finding their self-ground. Anna's talking about the capacity to relate to the self. Absolutely. That's where the poetry is. That's where your song is coming from. And so finding that beginning to happen is just, there's nothing else I'm going to do now but try to improve how this is going with my clients. I would say that most recently I came across Norman Doidge's book called The Brain's Way of Healing. And I would recommend everybody read this because it is, and I'm embarrassed, it was 2015 publication and I didn't find it till a few weeks ago. But the good news is that everything I've studied and concluded between now and then has taken me to the same point of understanding that we're looking at neuroplasticity. We're looking at helping the nervous system function and in so doing to support neuroplasticity. So my client who, wanted to celebrate 10 years with me, the neuroplasticity has been that her brain is beginning to perfuse better. We've been able to sort out some physical problems that were brain problems. She's had a stent inserted. She's able to get her color vision under control. She's able to get her balance under control. These are not the realm of regular therapy. So therapists who are consulting with me say, I have to change the way I'm practicing, right? And what am I adjusting to? I'm not just adjusting to doing different things and thinking different things. I'm having to communicate differently. I'm having to find these concepts in the language of an OT or in the language of somebody who does DBT or in the language of a chiropractor. And I have to find that language and build the bridge to them because this is so a paradigm shift that nobody can come find me. And so that's been my really big challenge, is how to talk about this, how to talk about it coherently, and with a degree of confidence in myself that I know what I'm talking about. Because if I'm not sure, my work is not good. That's just bottom line. So that's a bit of a torrent.
That's so powerful, Heather. Thank you for sharing. I'll invite the team to respond.
Well, thank you, Heather. And I think that's why I call the process the mosaic of healing. Mm-hmm. And that's what I'm using because it feels to me that that's the journey.
It is a mosaic and it is the fabric and it's the fabric of the person. And it's so utterly tragic to see people trying to become something when their fabric is not assembled or ripped to pieces.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah.
And I love you sharing that story, Heather, for people, if there's people on here who haven't used the SSP or sound interventions or things, or neuroplastic way, bottom up looking at their practices. When you start doing these practices with clients you've seen for years, the power is amazing. And when you start doing more bottom up approaches, you realize, yeah, my paradigm has to shift to this evidence-based, powerful way that we can change lives. You know, the thing we look at so often in our clinic is how many children sit on a wait list. And that was, you know, it's my goal to not have wait lists, because just for the parent to pick up a phone and say, I need help, or we need help, it's like some of these kids, it's urgent care and they need help now and not 9 months from now or a year from now. And sound, through the integrated listening system program, since I've been using them for 11 years, has just sped up progress immensely in the SSP, you know, double fold that. And so, you know, it's that same thing happened with all of us, is doing therapy the way we are currently doing therapy. You add a new tool and you assess how that tool's helped. And when you talk about that woman, like we, you know, just pay attention to those stories and you'll see the changes that occurred in that autonomic state, how that affects everything when we use the right tools. So thanks for sharing. Yeah.
Thank
So
you,
I think
Diane.
my practice, because people come to me for SSP because I'm not a therapist, so I always make sure people have got therapeutic support beforehand, and if they haven't, to make sure they have got that, because we never know what's going to happen when people come with suffering in whichever way, and some people don't know what they're coming with, they just know that they need something, and that understanding of state and the fact that they can shift it, and the fact that they can regulate and co-regulate and self-regulate, but there's so much more impact. So people can come with hearing issues, or they're just not coping with life, but as providers we have to be aware that they're coming with one thing, but it's going to have an impact on so many other parts because of the way that the SSP works, because we're often caught in that fight, flight, freeze, that dorsal sympathetic cycle going round and round and round and round, and we can't get out of it, because and we have to celebrate that as well, because that's how we've survived, but we want something different. And SSP, in the most extraordinary way, and I saw someone asked about it, I do actually do it once a week with people that have complex trauma, and sometimes I can only do a few minutes because that's all that's needed, but it's supported by polyvagal informed understanding of their states. We're mapping their states, we're regulating together, so the listening is drip fed into this foundation, these foundations or scaffolding, that so they can understand their state, they can befriend their systems, and then the things that unfold can be absolutely extraordinary, like Heather's been talking about. And the ways I like to look at it is that, you know, you've got your brain stem at the bottom of the brain, and then sort of quite simplistic, well, everything's simplistic because, you know, we are such complex beings, but then on top of that is the emotional brain, the limbic system. And as we start you know, not being stuck and start opening things up, then the repatterning that can happen, and then the limbic brain and the emotional system starts linking up, and we don't know what's there. So that's why there needs to be support around this, why it needs to go slowly. And the work that people do in between the sessions allows the integration, so that we carry on building the foundations, and then we can do some more work to open it up, so that we don't overwhelm the system, because these systems have been locked into a survival state, and we need to bring them out gently. These are fragile systems, you know, so, you know, less is more. We can't go too slowly almost so it's very different to Doreen's work with children, when adults have been stuck in this for so long. And then, like Heather was talking about, the things that the transformations that can happen, but they have to be allowed to happen as they need to happen. And often, you know, I call them back stitches, often they go backwards to go forwards again. So it's not a linear process, if only it were, but, you know, because they will tackle some difficult issues, and that's where the support needs to be, you know, the support that Heather's giving. And then the transformation that happens over this period of time is quite extraordinary. It just opens things up, but it's a real responsibility for us that we understand what we're opening up, and we've got facility to hold that. Because the potential is just enormous, but the survival state took a long time to bed in and be as locked as it is. And so the opening have happened at the sort of, and I like talking about the window, so the window of tolerance, the window of capacity, which is talked about in the Boston Trauma Conference this year. And I just love that we're increasing their capacity, and as their capacity increases, but it will go up and down with everything that's going on. but it's just beautiful to see how that then integrates with other things. And the work from the Boston Trauma Conference really supported all the things that we see with SSP, you know, their fMRI scanning and all the different things that the way that so many different parts of the brain now are being seen in a traumatized adult to an adult that hasn't had severe trauma. And it's just all supported by it. So these are exciting times. That's what we're seeing and what Heather's experiencing, and you know, we're all experiencing working with people with trauma. It really is, it's special work, but we have to be very careful. And the sensory work, this bottom-up work, is so important. The supportive work as things open up, to embrace it, to integrate it. Like, you know, Anna talking about the mosaic. I mean, and we just don't know what's going to happen, and the creativity that comes forth. And gosh, it comes forth. I never said that before, but it is that creativity that's just it's just beautiful to see people blossom. And but that can be overwhelming. Unfamiliar feels unsafe. So again, what's happened? We can go back to where we were. So again, we have to support and so that the new things become more familiar, so that we can then embrace them and then go on to the next stage. And there's no race for me. There's no race. Why would we be racing such a transformation? Because you know, there's a whole new life out there, but we have to do it with firm foundations and with all the support, you know, like Heather creates, and other wonderful SSP providers do. You know, it's a really special thing, but we're still working with it. We're still working. It's a whole new world.
Liz, I want to grab your word here, transformation, and speak to something that Diana Fosha calls she calls it transformance, which is basically a drive. I'm not getting into mental stuff here, but the drive to become. And these really are transformative moments. And if you think about what is resilience, I also think about Antonio Damasio talking about homeostasis, right? Homeostasis is the ability for the body to correct itself, the body to find its own balance, and the body to thrive. And so what I feel I'm doing is fostering something to come into being. It's like a bird, right? It's a transformance moment. Now I'm just supporting it. I'm not directing it. I'm nurturing it.
Thank you, Heather and Liz. That was so rich. I appreciate the call out to the instability that can come with shift and the great care and attention that is really essential to supporting that transformation. That's really well said. Liz, would you like to transition into your topic?
I can't, this sounds awful. I can't remember what I wrote.
That's okay. We've covered a lot.
Yeah, because I think my main thing was about it's this difference between top down and bottom up. How do we help that? Because so many clinicians come in and hearing that bottom up work, and it feels too binary. And so it's allowing people to understand. And you know, I've just talked about the Boston Trauma Conference. I mean, I still need my fix on science, because that's how I came into this work, and I was very science-based. And but I'm now an embodied person through my understanding of polyvagal theory, because of my own trauma history. Polyvagal theory absolutely transformed my life, and then SSP even more, because it then opened up that. So, but that informs my work. But I struggle to talk to people from a bottom-up direction if they've come from a top-down place, which is where the polyvagal theory comes in, because it's so rigorous. I mean, it comes from Stephen Porges, who is such the most extraordinary scientist. You can talk about the research and all those different things. So suddenly you can hook them in, which is what I needed. It's just like, oh, and suddenly, and although it can really fluster people that doesn't fit, at least we've got a way in. That there are, so it's like an invitation. It's just like, okay. Whereas if we just talk about bottom up, it's just it just feels too binary and too, I'm not going to be introduced to it, and that's such a shame, because there's such richness to it. And I think bottom up therapies are becoming much more recognised now. And the Boston Trauma Conference was just superb for that, in how all the different therapies are being explored and evidence being shown as to the changes it makes. So that's what I hope for. And that's what I'm always looking for. And I guess a lot of people find me for my work because they're coming through the polyvagal route. So they're much more interested in that, but they can still be very cognitive. And so it's helping them have the confidence that our bodies aren't our enemies, that we can work with them. And there's so much about, like we have to fight cancer. We have to, we give our bodies to doctors to do what they say, and then we give someone else's our bodies to do, we have to follow the instructions. And this is all about befriending. It's just like, so actually, what do you want? And that can be really scary. So it's coming alongside and understanding that it's just like, oh, really? And being exploratory and curious. And so I share a lot of my exploration of that because it is a personal journey. So I've been exploring. I was cut off here. I made my body do what I wanted to do. I loved different exercises, but I had no idea what was going because of my trauma history. My interoception was cut off, and I'm still learning and bringing it alive. And so I think it's making it personal and embodied, but also keeping the science so that we keep on integrating. And it's not a them and us. It's a how can we share, how can we respect those clinicians or people that find it difficult to think about bottom up, or think that, well, if you're bottom up, don't you like my top up? So we get defensive again, and bring in and understand where people are coming from, and to have a polyvagal perspective and understand people's perspective. Again, an unfamiliar feels unsafe. So again, we can be aware of that. It's just like, okay, so how do we create that familiarity, and how do we use a language that's familiar to them so that we can invite them in so that they can understand this rich world that is so much healthier and life enhancing. And I've never got through COVID without this whole thing, without my polyvagal understanding of an SSP. I use SSP over and over. It's so we walk our talk and embody it ourselves and lead by example, but really respect the theory as well, which is where I feel that our responsibility is that we keep it factual. When we're talking about polyvagal theory, we have a responsibility that we do understand it and we do know it. And if not, we say we don't, and we'll find out about it, because it is based on real theory. That's how SSP came. So it's that, and then we can get the respect of the clinical community, which Stephen Porges is doing, and we're all doing more. But for me, that's so that they come together and we carry on this journey. I just feel so privileged to know about polyvagal theory and have to experience SSP, but there are many that don't. And how can we attract more people and have that? The more we can be, to have all these SSP providers. How many we've got? 128 on this call at the moment. I mean, it's extraordinary that so many people want to know about this and are hungry for the knowledge. And so, I mean, it's just wonderful that you're all here wanting to know more. And it can be overwhelming, but I'm not going to, because I'm going to keep my feet on the ground and not be overwhelmed. But so again, I'm measuring my state all the time. It's a 24-hour day practice for me, and but always trying to keep the science there. And some people will, and some people won't. But I guess that's where I was coming from in my. I think that was the kind of thing I was saying in my question about.
That's great, Liz. I mean, I think what I hear you bringing attention to is this need to build bridges, both with the science to the clinical community, and then with clinicians and clients, and then with providers and families and clients, and the science with the medical system, and this need to communicate and integrate bottom-up therapy, including polyvagal informed approaches throughout the system and how we approach care.
Thank you, Rebecca. You said it beautifully.
Any other feedback or comments from the clinical team?
I think I'm just also really appreciating your capture, Liz, of the struggle to hold yourself as a practitioner in a reasonably steady place, learning this material that is frankly exploding, right? So part of the distress for the past couple of years has been feeling utterly overwhelmed by salient, important, critical information to be absorbed and deployed into your practice, and just how to support each other and the expertise that we all have. I did a little Facebook survey about a year and a half ago because there was so much distress in the group about bad practice. And so clearly people were afraid that practitioners using the SSP were going out there and causing all kinds of mayhem. And there certainly are instances where difficulties have happened. But in that exploration, it was a focus group that I did, what came out was that people didn't trust what other therapists were doing. That tells me that we don't know what other people are doing, and in not knowing it, we're assuming nothing. And so these clinical conversations I really welcome. I welcome the exchanges where we're identifying what piece do you have? What piece do you have? And how do we put them together? How do we power that up? What's the next thing after that? And keep us moving forward with cohesion and interest in the ultimate goal, which is to get this out there to help people.
That's a great call out, Heather. I think we are, even though things are moving forward so quickly and there's a lot of interest, we still are somewhat in the early days of understanding autonomic state, and certainly with the SSP. And so I'm so aligned with you that these kinds of conversations and moments are essential in continuing to cultivate the quality of delivery and supporting our patients the best way we can. I might segue from that. It's a nice transition to a question that was submitted by a provider named Irene, who's a speech therapist, before the webinar. And her question was around her own resilience and feeling challenged by protecting herself kind of emotionally and physically, and the challenge of needing to stay healthy and balanced while still being available to help patients. I wonder if that's something you all have experienced, or if you could speak to.
For me, self-care is essential, and it's very real. And I think there's I like to think about inside, outside, and between, which Dave Blainer talks about our neuroception for my work with clients, but also my own work with myself on a day-to-day, hour-by-hour basis. So at the moment, this is a stressful event for me. So I'm absolutely surrounded here with things that are really helping my feeling of well-being. They're lovely things that make me smile. And that, so my outside, I'm looking after really carefully. And there's sense, there's all sorts of different things so my sensory input. So that's my outside, and I'm always conscious about that. My inside, really sensing into my inside and thinking how I am feeling and looking after that. And my between is so important, especially during COVID times. We have been restricted to online work so much. And again, the triggers and glimmers, so on the outside, I've got all my glimmers here, but they're triggers, and the news is one trigger I can do without. So I really limit the amount I listen to the news. Even still, there are things that we can't even do anything about, and then suddenly a trigger comes in. And our inside, what are triggers and glimmers? And also relationships, because other people are so much more triggered as well, and we have to be aware of that. And we're giving so much, and our community and our work takes so much, so we have to look after ourselves even more. So my self-care is even greater because of what I'm having to give, because I like to be able to give, but I can't give if I don't have it myself to give. So my grounding practices and all my different things that I'm learning, I'm picking up and trying for myself, and then I'll share. But self-care is essential for us. And I really appreciate that question, especially in these COVID times, so hard. And the difficulties of working online and tech issues. And I was just like, gosh, tech is a trigger and gone. So SSP, I'm using SSP again now because of various things happening in my outside life, which wouldn't be happening if it wasn't for COVID, but they are happening. And there's a sensitivity that's been going on. We're all exhausted, and we have to all carry on looking after ourselves, because the clients that we work with, this work about giving, we're having to give all the time, and it's not coming to an end. So we must carry on looking after ourselves. And it's if only it wasn't as bad, but it is. And knowing that we can look after ourselves is really important.
I'd like to add one thing to that, Liz. Thanks. Yeah, these self-care things are so important. And, just looking up vagal toning and things we can all do to improve the tone of our vagus nerve, which SSP is an acoustic vagal nerve stimulator. And so it is a very large choice, or a powerful choice, I should say, that can help us to deal with these stressful times. And, but I also just want to speak, I found it fascinating during COVID that SSP was here for us. When everybody that, I think I heard there was maybe 500 people that even signed up for today, and they're going to, watch a recording. The family that we have had during COVID from SSP, there are Facebook groups that people have all, everybody's talking together on, learning from each other. Zoom calls, book studies over Zoom calls that are related to Deb Dana's books and anything around polyvagal theory. There's just so much of that. I've seen people, I think of a dear friend that many of us know, that their trauma has prohibited them from handling very much of the input from the SSP. But the healing that has come from that social engagement of all of the practitioners that are learning polyvagal theory and its effects has helped to heal her immensely. And so just again, the power of social engagement with people of like-mindedness, and SSP itself is just such a powerful healing tool that the family that you are joining when you're coming to these talks is powerful right there for self-care. Anna.
Thank you, Doreen. I hear that, and you just brought this wave of memory to me. A long time ago, Peter Levine, which is the founder of Somatic Experiencing, was traveling to Brazil and needed to study trauma. And I speak Portuguese, so I was supporting that trip. And we spent some time with a tribe called Krenak. And when the pandemic started, like a few months into it, it came to me, oh my God, what are they doing now? And we learned so many things through that stay. It was 1 week in the middle of nowhere. And I found out that the leader of that particular tribe was actually on YouTube. And he was talking about, during this time, the sky has fallen on the earth, and it has compressed the earth, and it has compressed all the rhythms of the humans. We can't drum, we can't dance, we've been compressed. So the process now is to refine our rhythms, to not let it die, so that as we start, it's the process that we start shaking and waking up that rhythm, the sky will lift itself back into the heavens, and the humans will have their capacity to become again. So, when that comes to me, and I said, okay, so there is a big cloud, well, maybe the heaven is now on top of us. We are refining our rhythms. And what is that? We are impregnated with the fear, right? We can't even breathe when that happens. We have to cover our faces. We can't get too close to anybody. So fear is there. And fear has a direct influence into the autonomic nervous system. It eventually drives us to something called freeze response. And if it's not interrupted, it drives us into what's called the voodoo death, where we actually die with an enlarged parasympathetic state in the heart. Dr. Robert Scare spoke of that a lot in his books. So I think during this time is how can we possibly refine and be in touch with our natural rhythms. And and so every weekend I gotta walk, I gotta go to the lakes, and I gotta be able to take my long walk. God, how can I find my rhythm in the day-to-day? Is in my breath, is in my movement, is in every single expression of me being alive. And I think if we bring that into our soft consciousness, so that we don't lose contact with that rhythm, we might be able to come on the other side in a very alive way. And as if truly we have, if we have gone through some kind and form of growth, like moving through periods where you come on the other side and you look back and you go like, yeah, I know where I was but I'm here now. So yeah, just came to me. Thank you.
Absolutely beautiful, Anna. Oh, just love that. Thank you.
I've learned so much with them.
Thank you for sharing, Anna. That's amazing. I think in the interest of ending on time, I might just take a moment here to pass it over to Susanna. I'm not sure if we have time, well, certainly not to answer all these questions, but I just want to thank everyone for the questions that they've submitted. And Susanna, can you speak a little bit to where folks might go if they're looking for information on products or training or related to SSP?
Absolutely. And thank you guys so much for all the amazing questions. I wish that we had time to get to all of them. But if you're looking for more information, of course, you can start at the website. Absolutely book a call with me. I'd love to discuss, the wonderful work that you're doing and talk about our programs and bottom-up approaches and how they may work within your practice setting. So I will post the link in the group chat again. If you want to go ahead and book a call, we can find a time to chat.
That's perfect. Thank you, Susanna. And wow, just a deep and sincere thank you to the clinical team here, to Doreen, Anna, Heather, and Liz for sharing your wisdom and your vulnerability on challenges and this really rich, inquisitive nature you all have. It certainly speaks to your not only your skill and expertise, but how much we value you as your need or your interest in constantly growing and learning and supporting each other. It's really awe-inspiring, to say the least. So thank you for your time and attention. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Rebecca, for a beautiful facilitation. Really.
And can I share one thing also, Rebecca, is just to remind people about the once a month Q&A. A lot of these questions that are in here are exact questions we go over. So if you're able to, I'm pretty sure that I do it one Friday a month at 9 a.m. Pacific time. And you can find it on the dashboard, the calendar for different Q&As. There's other practitioners that also handle Q&As and answer questions. So that would be a great place for a lot of these questions. That wasn't the intention for today. But the Q&As are, definitely good for that. So please join us. You just sign up. They're free. They're always listed on the Facebook groups, usually during the week before they're going to occur. And there is one next Friday, a week from today, I'm pretty sure. So
that's perfect. Thank you, Doreen.
There are recordings as well of the Q&As as well, aren't there, available on the dashboard, I think, which can be very helpful.
Yes.
Yes, thank you both. That's a good reminder for everybody. I'll share that the next clinical conversation, so the next event in this series, will be on September 8th at 12 o'clock Eastern time, and that will be with Dr. Porges and Kim Barthel. So we're really looking forward to that event. There will be a link to sign up in the follow-up email with the recording from this event. So you should all get an email on that. And of course, we'll continue to send out information on registration as we get closer to the time. So thank you all again. Reach out to Susanna if you have any questions, and I'll share for the clinical advisory team after I end this meeting, I'll open up our usual event time for our regular meeting, so we can have a little debrief if you'd like to join and chat a little bit. So, okay, thank you everybody. Take care.
Thanks for being
so
here.
Much.
Everybody.
Thanks everyone from all over the world at 2:30 in the morning in Saigon.
Yeah, for sure.
Wow.
Really special. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.